The Pittsburgh Steelers traded for Kyle Duggar from the New England Patriots, a safety to help replace DeShon Elliott's role. I want to talk about the impact of that and the difference between scheme and rules and why that could be the biggest breakdown that's happening on the Steelers defense. All here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Nick Farabaugh. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app today. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNFL and you get $20 off your first purchase. More on them later. We've got Nick Farabaugh from PennLive.com. Nick, for once in God's beautiful blue and green earth, Omar Khan made a trade before I recorded a show, and I am so happy. You know, I say this as they're probably going to trade for like Chris Olave, right? Is right as I say that, but I'm just happy that they got it done beforehand because I hate redoing my shows. But Kyle Duggar, the Patriots safety, who's now going to be with the Steelers, was traded for while DeShon Elliott does go on injured reserve. Essentially, it was a swap of a 7th-round pick for a 6th-round pick in this. It's also now apparent that the Patriots are basically taking the bulk of his salary this year, and the deal that he's basically going to be untied to the Steelers with is just a 1-year rental deal. So basically a low value pickup, despite the big contract that he had to stay in New England from last year before they hired Mike Vrabel. What do you think the trading for a Kyle Duggar does for this secondary, and can it be part of a process to fix what's been going on?
I mean, it feels like a replacement for DeShon Elliott to me more than anything. That's what it feels like. I think losing DeShon Elliott is catastrophic to the run defense. I really do. He's just such a big part of that. He saved that Bengals game from becoming much worse a lot of the time. He made a few really nice plays against the Packers too. Whenever he went out against the Packers, they started to actually have success running the football, and I don't think that was coincidence. So I think what a guy like Duggar brings, 6'1", 210, big frame, physical, willing to come downhill. He's also pretty fast. So he brings a lot of different traits. He's smart. He's really good. He almost gives you an extra linebacker sometimes. That's what DeShon Elliott brought to the table too. And so I think that's really what he does bring to the tables. He's a direct replacement for DeShon Elliott. He fits the run. He can man up on tight ends with his length because he has a lot of length that he can utilize in man-to-man situations. His coverage skills, little shaky. If you watch the Patriots film, that's not really where he has exceeded, and that's a big reason why he's fallen out of favor for guys like Jalen Hawkins and Craig Woodson up there in Foxborough. The injuries to his lower body have kind of sapped a little bit of his high-tier athleticism he had coming out of college, but he's still a good athlete. He's probably one of the better athletes in their secondary right now, to be quite honest with you. So he adds a different force to the box. And so I'm interested to see now where they kind of go with the free safety position, because I think the starter at strong safety is almost certainly going to be Kyle Duggar whenever he's up to speed.
I feel you there, Nick, because I do think this is a team that wants to have that box safety, or not even a box safety, but a strong safety who could come down, make the big hit while also covering underneath, being able to play in space. And he's got good size, 6'2", 220s, a guy that could play that. And when you look at his snap alignment, it seems like there's a pretty close split in his snap alignment between lining up in the box and lining up in the free for the Patriots. Last year it was a little bit more heavy for the box. This year it seems like it's a little bit more split on the even side. And like you said, he kind of fell out of favor with the new coaching staff for what they were trying to ask of him, and that's why he was such an easy get for the Steelers. I do think that this can help, but I still think that the problems that the Steelers have right now in the section in the secondary are structural, that guys can fix, but there have to be fixes across the board. There have to be, and we're going to talk about that more in the next segment. But I think that Kyle Duggar can mitigate the loss of a DeShon Elliott, because he was so more important than a lot of people realized to what the Steelers wanted to do. And if he can fit in for a year and give you that for a short time, that's great. And it also, but I also think that the Steelers need to be smarter with how they're deploying their secondary and matchup wise. I still think Darius Slay showed that he's not giving you anything on the outside really at this point. And then at safety, I feel like if Duggar's one of your safeties, you still got Juan Thornhill who can play deep. You got Jabrill Peppers who can kind of also float around, and Jalen Ramsey's been floating back to safety at times. You have those things available. I think they need to be smart about how they use these guys and what matchups they ask them to get into.
Right. I do think Duggar allows them to be a little more liberal with kind of what they do, a little more free in what they do. And here's the thing. How many times do I have to say this? I don't need to see Chuck Clark. I'm sorry. I don't need to see Chuck Clark. In the box at free, I don't need to see Chuck Clark. With all due respect to him, I think the starting safeties should be the former Patriots. I think it should be Duggar in the box and Pep out back and free. And you can mix them up a little bit. I'd rather have Pep back kind of in space. I think Duggar nowadays in space is a little testy. And so I would like to see Peppers back there. That would be my two starting guys, and then you can mix in Juan Thornhill and Jalen Ramsey as you wish. But Peppers, in his limited time playing, has played good. I think he's been a very solid addition to them. And where Duggar comes in is you can then bring in him down into different fronts. If you want to play your man-free cover one stuff, I think he allows you to do a lot of that still. I think he probably is a little bit better in the man-to-man situations than a guy like Chuck Clark. So with that length especially, you're going to allow that to kind of really come in there. I also think something that the Packers did really well was they really kind of set the Steelers up with the screen game and to the flat. I think what Duggar does really well is he's going to mitigate that. He's physical. He's downhill. He'll fight through blocks. He'll tackle in space well. This team needs, and this is something I noted on the film, this team needs some dog energy on this defense right now. And I think both safeties I just mentioned, Peppers and Duggar, bring that. They need physicality. They need a spark. And I think both of those guys can bring that. And so I don't think Kyle Duggar fixes everything. Far from it. I think there's a lot of things we'll talk about that need to be fixed. But I think he can at least be a small step in the personnel department to giving them some things that they have with DeShon Elliott now that they will have without him.
I'm right with you on the dog part of this. I think that these guys can be that, and I think that if they are that, it helps this team be that. Because I think that, again, I think this defense has the pieces to kind of be the physical unit they want to be. I think the idea that they can be an elite cover team is out the window, but I still think that there is the chance for this secondary to be good enough to limit things at the start of plays, so that the offenses and quarterbacks, they have to hold on to the ball longer in the pocket, and it gives the pass rush actually time to get home, and that this team still can get after the quarterback. They just haven't been able to, because over the last 2 weeks, quarterbacks are getting the ball out before 3 seconds, and you need at least 3, 4, sometimes 5 seconds for the pass rush to get home. And I think that's a big part of what this secondary, if there's one thing that I think Mike Tomlin and Teryl also should be preaching as far as, results based and getting and what you want to come out of it, there's always processes as how to do this, but it's to make sure that, hey, we are taking away the first read. We are not letting guys get off the line, clean. We're not letting guys just be open in the first 2 seconds. And if we do that consistently, our pass rush and our run defense will win. And then we will be a good enough defense to pair with what looks like an actually good offense.
Right. And that's the crazy thing is the offense has a floor now. Like, the offense is scoring 20 or more points in all but one game this year. I mean, that's been the thing. And so if you just have a league average defense, you feel like you can go to battle and win a lot of games against even good teams. This pass defense should not be the worst unit in football, but right now they are per game, allowing the most passing yards in the NFL per game. That should not be a thing. I get there's limitations with it. They're not a fast secondary. They're a pretty slow group. So they struggle tackling in space and allow a lot of yak. So that's something I think that's also an issue. But they should not be this bad. And one thing I would, and we'll get into the schematic discussion, but even with Duggar, let's ratchet the blitz rate down a little bit. Like, You don't need to be blitzing 6 every single play. It's okay to blitz 4 every now and then, because I do think a lot of teams have started to figure out their blitz looks and are starting to just kind of hit the hot read right behind some of them. And it's really kind of making these blitzes almost useless in some respects. There was also one play where I don't know what went into it. They blitzed DeShon Elliott from like 10 yards back. It was on the quick pass to Tucker Kraft that went for like 35 yards after the catch on a quick flat route. Like, I don't know what that is. So blitz rate going down a little bit. Duggar, I think, can be utilized as a blitzer too, in lieu of someone like Jalen Ramsey, so you can get better coverage people kind of back there and in man-to-man and in zones. I like the idea of having Ramsey blitz, but I'd like him more in coverage right now. I think they need as many talented players as they can in coverage, try and cover up, stay disciplined in zones. So if Duggar can take some of that off his plate, I think that's a good idea too.
Yeah, I feel you there. I want to talk about some of the things that the Steelers defense does need to improve upon. And I think I want to reframe what I think a lot of fans misunderstand is a part of this, that is on coaching, just not in the way that a lot of people have been just trying to reach to blame. I'll talk about that with Nick here next on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you, this show is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to innovate that are available in Napa leather upholstery, and they'll have all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, so that you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like the players, they sweat through every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. We're also brought to you by Gametime. The NFL season is well underway, and there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It's frustrating. That's why you got to use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, and the price that you see is the price that you pay. I pulled up Gametime in just a couple taps. I can see amazing deals. We're talking about $100 for your favorite NFL games. I love zone deals too, where you Gametime, if you pick the section, Gametime will pick the seats, and you'll save big. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way that I've bought tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, this promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh of PennLive.com. Nick, there's something that I think that people don't understand about where breakdowns often happen. Like, people say, "Oh man, you see that when you see this guy run wide open against the Steelers defense, and you're like, that's a terrible scheme." And there are times when I think a scheme is out of place, or that a play call is like, "Hey, this might have been the best." But most of the time, a scheme was in place that could have eliminated a guy, and someone made a mistake. And sometimes those mistakes are on the player, just being boneheaded or forgetting something. But sometimes I think that mistake can also be tied to what, are known as rules. Now, these are things that, football. I apologize for explaining something very basic, but I was talking to a fan and they didn't understand this when I said this. And I'm like, maybe this is something that I'm thinking people don't fully know. But a rule, basically, the way we're talking about it right now, is a situation when you're on defense and an adjustment happens pre-snap and you're in a certain alignment. And there are certain rules where if you're in a certain coverage, like say you can, and the other team goes into a bunch formation where there's 3 receivers kind of crowded around each other, and you're there with 3 other guys, and you're like, hey, we have certain rules in place when we're in this coverage, and we see this formation that we've seen that they like to run, how we handle it. Because oftentimes, like a bunch formation, the guy that's most of the inside will run behind the guys that are outside of him. And so if you're the cornerback that's closest to the inside with him, it's going to force you to run through those 2 receivers and your 2 defensive backs. So sometimes your job is to, hey, in this, we got to read their reactions, and maybe the outside guy takes that guy. And so there's different rules for different situations. And Nick, I think that's where I've seen the most breakdown happens when a team motions, or there's something happens that the Steelers have to adjust to, that's where you see the breakdowns and the miscommunications and the biggest problems happen in the Steelers defense.
It's the motions, man. How many times do we see a motion than this on the field from guys? So many times. I saw it on the Romeo Doubs 2-point conversion. I know they had 10 guys on the field, but they busted that coverage anyways. They had the numbers to the side.
That's the crazy part. Right. They had 10 dudes, and it was still a bust.
Right. So it was a bunch formation. They were trying to do something called banjoing, which just kind of means, depending on leverage, you take the point man gets taken by the guy nearest to him, and then depends on where you go. So Ramsey and Porter ended up covering the same guy because Porter was pressing the point man, and Ramsey never went with the outside guy. So, yeah, I mean, that's crazy to me. Rules are certainly something, and not only is there rules of who you are supposed to pass off, to which leverage you're supposed to pass off, there's also depth. There's also leverage rules. You have help rules. There's all these different things adjusted based on route depth, route concept, motions, who gets pushed where. It's all different things. And run fits, we talk about run fits. Run fits are basically rules themselves, right? A rule in a run fit is you have the C gap, or you have the B gap, or you're the crack replace guy, or you're all these different things, right? So there's different rules all around. And the Steelers defense struggles doing the basics. And that is a big reason why they look as bad as they are. That's partially player, that's partially coaching. Goes to both of those blame. And so communication, details, being in the right run fit, being in the right gap, just playing your assignment in general. There's too much hero ball going on this defense, right? There's too much guys trying to make a play.
Explain hero ball again for the people that might not be initiated.
So hero ball, is if I am playing cover one, and if you're the free safety, for example, obviously in cover one, you have that deep middle. But instead of staying in that deep middle, I try and cut a crosser down that's not in that deep middle, and I instead leave a wide open post behind me where my corner was expecting help, and I lit up a big play because I was playing for an interception. That's playing hero ball. Same thing in a run fit situation. If I'm supposed to have the B gap, but I try to knife through the A gap and try and make a TFL, and that running back then cuts it right back to the B gap where I was supposed to be, I played hero ball and allowed a big play because I was trying to make a play. I was trying to push to make a play. When you are not assignment sound, when you are not playing within the confines of a defense, it often opens up to having big plays. Oftentimes when you hear good hero ball happen, you hear many stories about guys like Troy Polamalu, for example.
Polamalu, he's the king of hero ball.
Right, he was the king of hero ball. But what allowed Troy Polamalu to be really good at hero ball? They specifically designed rules to allow Troy to freelance, right? Ryan Clark would do these things, and Ike Taylor would do this. James Farrier would do this to make sure Troy can do as he wishes. This defense does not have that. They do not have a player that they're like, go make a play wherever you can. And right now, guys are pushing for big plays, and it's actually hurting their abilities to get turnovers.
I agree. I asked Mike Tomlin about how they work on that when it's something that they've worked on since training camp. This is not new. This is not, a new revelation or anything. It's something that is drilled early on in the season, early on in the preseason or in training camp. And I thought he gave an interesting answer, and he also followed up about, more communication issues on a question later. Listen to Mike Tomlin from Tuesday's press conference when I got to talk to him.
Mike, when you guys install rules on, for the defense to respond to different things as the pre-snap plays out, and you're seeing mistakes that continue to happen, how do you guys course correct on that when it's like, hey, we've installed this, what it is, and it's still being a problem?
I think you're always putting 8 pounds in a 5-pound bag. I just think that's the nature of what we do as coaches. There's never completeness of work. You never can say, oh, we got that. Now, you got it until the next time something comes up. And that's not only defensively, but that's in all 3 phases of the game. You're continually tooling and retooling what it is that you do, making sure that it remains sharp. And when it doesn't, finding the appropriate fixes or alterations in an effort to keep concepts, people, or units going.
Do you still see communication issues in the secondary, or is it just guys not finishing plays?
In some instances, it's communication, but communication is always strained in the secondary, particularly when you're faced with pre-snap shifts and motions. And so I'm not going to act like that's some earth-shattering statement. As I mentioned when we were talking about tooling and retooling, that's a component of coaching that you'll always be urgent regarding. Pre-snap communication, because week in and week out, the adjustments change, the shifts and motions change based on offensive units, based on the talent within those offensive units, how you choose to deploy your people based on those things. And so there are alterations to communication and adjustments every week, and so there's always urgency there. We certainly can be better there, and we will.
There you have things, Nick, where you're sitting there and you're listening to Mike, and he's acknowledging coaching is part of this, and I think you should, because to me, where a lot of people will try to like go for the easy fruit of, oh, I hated this play call, or this scheme is bad, or this is this, and I'm like, or they called the same play all game, and I'm like, look, I know these sound sexy, these sound cool, these sound smart. A lot of times they're just the easiest thing that someone grabbed to on Twitter, and then you ran with it because you were mad and you were a Steelers fan and you just wanted to post about it. And on the random occasion, sometimes you'll be right about like a couple things, but most of the time that's not it. But when you look at this, I do think that there are things where it's like, hey, like this is where Mike Tomlin needs to be better, where he needs, because Mike Tomlin is the motivator of men. He's the guy that he gets his team to lock in, to buy in, to do what they're supposed to do. And even if they're not the best, the fastest, the quickest, or nothing like that, they're gonna do their jobs to the best of their abilities. And if they get beat, they get beat. And I think that's where this iteration of this defense has not done this year, because even in past years, like I know a lot of people, I got into people on Twitter yesterday who said that Teryl Austin is worse than Matt Canada. I'm like, look, whatever your opinion of Teryl Austin, the guy has coached a top 10 defense for the last 3 years with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Matt Canada never got out under 26th in offense. Like, full stop. No, that's not a thing. Is he having a bad year this year? Absolutely. But this, I think, is like more tangible thing where it's like, hey, you're calling these plays. These plays even kind of make sense a lot of times. Like the play where Juan Thornhill jumps the out route to Romeo Doubs, but just doesn't cover Doubs. He covers a random blank space on the field. And so Jordan Love just lets the ball go. And if a Thornhill playing the right angle, it's an interception, maybe a pick six with the angle that he had, because he had so much momentum on him. And I just think, like, if they do those things, the scheme then does make more sense. But again, it comes back to knowing your rules and executing your rules in the moment.
100%. And execution, blown assignments, communication, technical flaws. While it's partially player, it also is coach. And that's coaching, I think. That's part of it. The schematics that they run. I mean, I say man free. What am I really just saying? I'm just saying it's cover one with man coverage, guys. It's not everyone runs man free. Everyone runs it. You can't say country cover 3 is bad. Everyone runs it. Run some variation of it. You get to it in different ways, and there's techniques and communication kind of ways to go through it, and ways that you play it at this depth and here and here. And the Steelers players are not executing their assignments, rules, depth, techniques, all this stuff at a high level. And that's not just player, that's coaching. And so you're seeing it pop up. When you're seeing guys go out there, to be quite honest with you, Chris, this was the one thing that coaching, we talked to Mike T and TA about. There were guys in this game dogging it. Dogging it on some of these plays.
And that's the stuff you can't have.
Yep. You can't have that. And I'll say this, Darius Slay was one of them, and his snap count got very much reduced from there on out. And so
I think it should continue to be. That's why he got a bus ticket this week.
I agree. And so to me, we are seeing clear coaching errors. 10 men on the field. Eccles didn't realize that they were going for 2. As a coach, save your player. Call a timeout. Like things like that. Those are coaching things, detail-oriented stuff. And so when we are talking about these rules and these techniques, yes, the players hold some of the blame of it, but if it's not getting through to 11 guys, maybe even more than that, depending on how deep your rotations are, at some point, it's not just the players. It's your coaching. And so you got to look at that too.
And that's where I think that's an actual critique, because sometimes there's a lot of times they're just blamely laid at just because everything's the coach's fault at some point. And there's sometimes where it's not. Sometimes it's, nah, dog. A horse got to drink the water when the horse drinks the water. There's an assignment. You were supposed to do it. You blew it. That's on you. But I think these are moments where they can iron these things out and try to get them to be better, because we have seen, and the crazy part is we have seen them do it, Nick. In the early part of the Packers game in the first half, they were cutting things off. They saw the setups that the Packers were using to try to fool their man coverages. They were in position more often than not. The early on, the first 2 drives against the Bengals, there was a shallow cross where they tried to open up space for Jamar Chase, and Juan Thornhill comes from the deep safety position, cuts it off, and I was like, oh, they're looking better. They're looking sharper. But in both of those games, it was like it deteriorated throughout the game, and that to me, that's that doggedness. That's that not responding well to adversity that Cam Hayward's talking about. That to me is where, if you're the coaches, sometimes it's beyond even the scheming. It's you guys got to get up and play, and I think that's a big part of this. But I want to talk more about coaching, particularly how Mike Tomlin talks about a lot of these things, because Nick, you and I were on Twitter, and it got wild after Mike Tomlin's Tuesday press conference, and it always does in a way, but I think it's because people don't understand what's actually being said sometimes. I want to break that down and talk with Nick about Mike Tomlin's speak and what it actually means sometimes, and how I think fans would be better to understand what's being said or not being said that's actually going on, probably behind closed doors. We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh. Stick with us. Be right back.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs. With features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance, you can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go, while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So, let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh. Nick, there are some times, and I've talked about this with Josh Taylor, shout out to him on the show before, but there are some times that when Mike Tomlin is talking, I think even most times when Mike Tomlin's talking, that you got to do what's called read between the lines. A lot of times he is saying something because he has to say something, because he has to talk to us, because it's mandated by the NFL. But if it was Mike Tomlin's way, he would not say nothing to me, nothing to you, nothing to the fans outside of thanks for showing up. And a lot of what he does in press conferences is to protect his team, to not know what's going on behind closed doors, and to not expose people unless he wants to send a message sometimes. And I think that gets lost on people who listen to that press conference and they know, why isn't he cussing up a storm? Why isn't he yelling? Why isn't he so mad, like the way I'm mad as a fan, that our defense ranks 30th in total yards and last in passing yards and all these things that I think he should be so mad about. And I think it's because you got to understand that there's a way that's being handled about this. And most coaches do this too. Like, I think the best coaches at dealing with media, I think Sean McVay is very good at this. Like, they'll give you a nice long-worded answer. Some people call it Tomlinism, some people call it word salads, whatever. But in it, when you read through it and you're trying to like put it in your article, you're like, he really didn't say anything here. But he found a colorful way to display this talking point that we can at least throw in our article for a little bit. But he didn't reveal anything to me that actually exposes something behind the scenes that he's protecting.
It's funny to me when people expect him to rip his coordinators.
Yes.
You know, he got asked about Teryl Austin multiple times today. He's not going to rip TA. He said he was pleased with his performance.
Yeah.
If you actually think Mike T is pleased with what TA and this defense have put up, I'll sell you something in Manhattan right now. You know, like, he didn't even rip Canada. Like, before they fired Canada, he didn't rip him, and he didn't rip him after they fired him either. That's not what Mike does. That's not what Mike is about. he's not going to rip Arthur Smith for going away from the run game in the second half. Whether that was Arthur Smith or Aaron checking at the line, actually. It could have been one of two things. He's not going to rip his coordinator or his quarterback publicly. This is just not going to happen. And so you kind of have to read between the lines on that and say, you know what? This question is going to be asked because it is going to be asked, and some people are talking about it. What are you going to get? You're not going to get much of anything. Every now and then you do, and that's why you ask them, and that's when he wants to send a message. But, he's very rarely going to rip a player publicly, right? They're going to deal with that behind closed doors. Why has he not just eviscerated his secondary? Same reasons.
Yeah.
What you heard him say about Darius Slay today is about as critical as he's going to get publicly of a player. He's been good in some circumstances, less than ideal in others. It was something along those lines. That's going to be what you're going to have, unless the player's just outright going to get cut. I remember, you remember when Gunnar Olszewski did the toe tap thing? I remember that.
Yeah.
That was a pretty colorful, honest answer. But otherwise, you're not really going to get much of anything. And you mentioned Sean McVay. Sean McVay, what he does a lot is he'll recite play calls and give you fun things from the past. And I call that, that's that press catnip right there. You love to eat on that stuff, right? It's good for your video clips. It's good for TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and social media platforms. They put on a good act, but publicly, they're not going to tell you much of anything.
And they shouldn't. I think that's the other thing about this is that these coaches don't. These coaches owe, I guess, their efforts to the team to get it done, to make sure that they're prepared as best they can, and then when they're in these press conferences, to protect them. Because we as reporters, we're trying to get as much information as we can, and it's not good for us to have certain information. It's you want to keep it from getting out there. It's why in college coaches before this year there was never an injury report because college coaches didn't want you to know who might actually play in a game. I just think that people don't understand that perspective of what coaches are really doing and saying in certain points. And there will be times where he wants to deliver a message, where he tries to get, where he's like, hey, like when years ago when he called Mike Wallace a one-trick pony, I think sometimes you want to motivate a guy and just be like, hey, this guy's really good. I'm going to just say this thing just to maybe tick him off a little bit and diversify his route tree a little bit more. And I think those are things that sometimes it'll shine through. But most of the time, what they're trying to do is they'll answer your questions, but they want to do so confidently, and they want to do so in a way that gets it across that they've heard us, that they are responding to it, but that does not expose anything that would, that when people peel that back a little bit more, they're like, oh, wait a second, this is a big problem, over here. And to your point, he's not going to bury people because, if there's a time to bury certain guys, I think there's certain times where it's like, hey, you know what? Like Gunnar Olszewski, or like when he kind of was open when Devlin Hodges was the quarterback, he's like, look, we're not basing our offense off of Devlin Hodges' ability to throw the ball. We're just trying to find a way to survive here. And there's times when you could be honest like that, but like, Jalen Ramsey and Darius Slay are two long-respected veterans in the NFL, and if you start talking smack about them out in public and things like that, then it turns into drama. And then you have like what's going on with the Jets right now, where Woody Johnson, came out and said what he said about Justin Fields and how that put a tenor in that situation that just was not helpful. That is so much what goes into coach speak. And so when people get mad about it, I just feel like, man, your anger is so misplaced. You don't even know where to put it right now.
Yeah, he sends position groups messages sometimes. I remember, I want to say it was in 2020, and this receiving group was having so many drop issues, and he said, catch the ball or get replaced. That's a message to motivate a room, right? That's what he uses as a conduit, basically. And then there's other times where you can also use the head coach as a means to get meaningful information, not about maybe the team, but about the sport, about a trend in the league, about something going on where it speaks to a wider thing, and it makes you, the fans, and everything smarter. It's part of the reason these things exist. So, you can ask Mike T about why there's so much 6 offensive line kind of packages being utilized in the NFL. And I'm sure we would get a great answer out of Mike T on that, because the Steelers are one of those teams that are utilizing that. So there are things like that. But I can ask him 20 million times, why does Nick Herbig not play more? And he's not actually going to answer why Nick Herbig's not playing more, right? And so you don't get a lot of the bluntness, because it doesn't benefit him at all. It doesn't benefit him to say, Teryl Austin has done a terrible job this year. I have no faith in him, or I'm losing faith in him. What does that do for anybody? It doesn't do good for anybody. You keep that behind closed doors. You have the honest conversations, man-to-man, face-to-face, in the locker room, in his office, whatever, in the film room, and that is what it is. You do not air that out publicly unless something is just very wrong.
And oftentimes the guys that do, that often leads to turmoil and more problems, and then all of a sudden you got a room upside down. And I think that's one of the things that Mike Tomlin has done so well in his career, is he has avoided those fires, and sometimes he's even put them out himself because there's been drama in the Steelers locker room, and with questions about things and how certain guys respond, and he'll often ratchet it down, say, hey, this is what it is, and get it there. But I think these are things that as reporters we see it every day. And it's something that we all kind of talk about as soon as the press conference is over, when we talk to these guys. And it's not just Mike. I think, again, a lot of the coaches do it very, very well. But it's just, I just wanted to take some time at the end of this show to remind people, because I saw how many people got tied up. And I see it every week when people get tied up. And why won't he say the thing that I want him to say, which is going to make me feel so much better about how mad I am about this team right now? That's not what he's going to do. That's not what he should do, because that's not you as the fan are not what's being protected here, being made you're not the important part here. What's the important part when he's talking to us is to make sure his organization and his players and his coaches are protected, and they can keep focusing on what they need to focus on, which could help if they actually do that this week.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of multiple times in NFL history when a coach maybe got too big for his britches publicly, and that sent a ripple through the locker room in a way that it should not have. Those moments of honesty are obviously something that media, fans are like, we want more of that because it's so juicy. It's the salaciousness of it all, right? I think that's a great word to utilize. It's salacious. It's dramatic. You like that. But it is not smart as a coach to air that out. Look at any of the top coaches in the league. Even Andy Reid does this, and he does it in a different way. He does, he makes all the dad jokes, and he kind of does that. And he'll take like little fun pot shots at Pat Mahomes and Kelsey and others where it's like an inside joke. And that's his way of covering for it. You see different strategies around this, but good coaches do not air things out publicly. Like I can remember Mike Singletary saying, you can't win with players. When Vernon Davis was an issue, and he said, you can't win with them. And that didn't go over very well in the locker room. And how much longer did Mike Singletary last as a head coach of the National Football League? Go look that up. Didn't last very long.
So that's a great recall to bring up Mike Singletary, because oh boy, were some of those weird. But again, just wanted to take some time to do that. We've covered the trade and we covered some things, but I thought that might be a helpful thing for those out there that do invest themselves into checking out press conferences. We're at the Steelers facility again today. It's the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Nick, thanks so much for joining us here. Let people know where they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Farabaugh Blue Sky Nick Farabaugh. Check the Steelers stuff out, penlive.com/Steelers, and the YouTube channel, The Steelers Blitz.
Absolutely. He's Nick Farabaugh. Nick, thanks for joining us. Thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, whatever you get your social medias on. It's usually at Carter Critiques is my handle. You can always read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com, including a film study that I should have up by this morning on the problems in the secondary, the communication, and all the different rules issues that we're talking about here. So do check that out in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. From Chris Carter, from Nick Farabaugh, thanks for watching the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll see you tomorrow for Crossover Thursday with the guys from Locked On Colts.